Hello, I'm Mary V. Today, let's talk about how the position of your violin affects your left arm. So, as usual, many things come back to the shoulder rest. You've got to have a comfortable shoulder rest position that allows the violin to sort of sit on your chest, really, very comfortably, so you don't have to clutch with your head. So I do have other videos about how to fit a shoulder rest properly. So I'll put the link to those in the description. So for example, if your violin is very high, like that, and it means that the left arm has got to twist an awful lot to reach around to the G string. You see, just like that, that's really too much. You don't want your upper arm to be so crushed in and your elbow. Now I've taken my shoulder rest off to show you the next one. If your violin is very flat, you don't have the help from the shoulder rest to tilt the violin up like this. So it's sitting flat just on your collarbone, but it means that you have to sort of twist around to get to the G string quite a bit. So you're not helping yourself. So a pad or something to help tilt the violin up is very helpful because you can reach the G string much more easily. Okay, so there's the advantage of a shoulder rest. So here's my shoulder rest, and over the shoulder side I've got quite a bit of height to tilt my violin, and then the other side is a lot lower. And I've also changed the angle of my shoulder rest so it fits perfectly. It sits there absolutely perfectly with no need to clutch with my head. It's tilting the violin so I don't have to sort of reach around a ridiculous way to play on the G string. So there's something else that can cause quite a lot of pain and discomfort in the left arm, and it's holding the violin too high like this and off to the left. So not only is your left arm having to twist around too much, but you've got a permanent position turning your head to the left, and that gives you pretty sore neck after a while. It's better to be front facing and to put your violin in like this, sort of more to the front, coming down from your chin like this. So if you have the strings parallel to the ground, then you'll see that the violin is tipping up the way, the violin body. But if you have the violin body parallel to the ground, you will see that the strings are facing down the way. That's the correct way. The strings should be facing down instead of parallel to the ground. Okay, so make sure that your shoulder rests allow you to put the violin at the right angle. The reason for this is because your arm and your hand is lower than your head and your shoulder. So it's anatomically correct to allow this to be further down. So something that needs a lot of flexibility in your arm is to play with the fourth finger. You don't want to have a position like this. It immobilizes the fourth finger and makes it straight, actually. So you need to have a bit of movement in your wrist to bring your fourth finger sort of up, right? So that you're not playing with it straight. Do everything you can to avoid that, because it makes it very rigid, and everything rigid actually. The hand, the fourth finger is hopeless. It can hardly do vibrato like that. So the next thing is how much the elbow underneath needs to swing to play on each string. So let's have a look at that. So you can see that really there's very little difference between playing on the E string and playing on the G string, but it's very necessary to have that movement and flexibility. So let's use our fourth finger and see if that makes much difference. So you can see the need to have a flexible wrist to bring the hand up to play the fourth finger like that. So there's different movements going on. There's different movements of the hand, there's movements of the wrist, and there's movements of the arm. Be aware that the tendons at the back of the hand, they run right down the forearm. And when you hold your hand in violin position and move your fingers quite fast, you'll be able to feel the action of those tendons right down the forearm here. Now, at the same time, it's a good idea to be aware of what your bicep muscle is doing. It should be in a passive situation. It has to sort of hold the arm up, but it shouldn't be flexed and really tight, because that, in fact, interferes with the action of the fingers. So violinists have to have this position for quite a long time. So it's really best to be aware of the large bicep muscle here and make sure that it's in a passive situation. In other words, that it's simply holding the position, but it's doing no more than that. So to exercise the wrist and make it a bit more flexible, all you do is simply move your wrist in towards the violin with all the fingers down, and see if you can get a nice fourth finger action from doing that. It should push the fourth finger into a nice curved position. So that is a great way of practicing that. And if you practice that on all strings, then that's another way to check that your bicep muscle here isn't doing anything really like that. A lot of people get rather rigid. They're holding the violin tightly with their head and shoulder, and they're just, they've got a very rigid left hand with a squeeze between the first finger and the thumb, and just starting to sort of allow the first finger to be on a hinge and move it like this. This is such a good thing. So if you can move your wrist and allow your first finger to sort of be touching, but sort of moving like that while touching, that's the first way to start releasing that grip that between the first finger and the thumb. So just remember, it's a false idea to test your shoulder rest to see if it works by just holding with your head alone. That's a kind of false idea, because the violin is never held like that, but it's always shared. Holding the violin is always shared between the left hand and the head, so that both can be incredibly light. So it's by actually doing this, something like this, where you can see if you can move your head and whether your violin has a little bit of movement in it. By the way, this is another absolutely fantastic exercise for your left hand, the whole of your left arm, to see if you can sort of have this movement, allow the violin to move and not clutch with your head. So it's a bit like everything comes back to the shoulder rest, but as a matter of fact, that is one of the most basic things to make sure that it doesn't become an instrument of torture and that it actually helps you. It's not something that should make you rigid and then you can't move and you're forever left clutching between your jaw and your shoulder. That's not what it's for. It's actually to free you so that you can actually move, right? But the requirement is that this has got to be fitted correctly. So there's lots of ways that you can help yourself if you have pain and discomfort, or you find that you just can't do a certain technique. It may be that you just need to go back to something a little more basic and practice moving like this, right? And then go back to your piece and find that your fourth finger is moving better. So there's always an answer on the violin. So I hope you get on well with your experiments, and I'll leave it there. Bye.